Hola, ¿qué sopa mi gente? En el video de hoy voy a estar hablándoles de cómo pueden aprender el español de una manera más rápida y efectiva. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how you can learn Spanish in a much faster and effective way. But first, I'd like to start with a quick disclaimer that I think is really important. Escúcheme bien. You guys are not going to be able to learn Spanish in just 3 to 4 months. It doesn't just happen overnight in a couple of months. Learning Spanish to a fluent level takes quite some time. But here's the good news. You guys can learn Spanish in just as little as a year to 2 years, depending on how much effort and time you put into it. And if you follow this routine that I'm going to be showing you guys today in this video, I'm going to be telling you guys exactly what I did to get to a fluent level. Okay, so before we go into the nice routine and strategies that I'm going to be sharing with you guys that'll help you get fluent in Spanish faster, I'd like to talk about a few important topics as well. First off, let's define what fluency is. A lot of people have different opinions on this, and I'd like to share mine with you guys. But first, we're going to start with Google's definition.
So according to Google, you're fluent if you're able to express yourself easily and articulately. I agree with this, but I just think the definition of fluency is very subjective.
My definition of fluency is being able to simply have a fluent conversation with a native speaker from anywhere, no matter the country or where they're from, without having to trip up or think too hard, and just being able to flow and maintain a conversation and being able to fully express yourself the way you would want to. I'm going to show you guys how you can learn to enhance your understanding skills to a fluent level and speak without thinking at a point. En mi caso, ahora yo soy fluido en español, así que para mí, yo no tengo que esforzarme mucho, simplemente me sale el español así mismo como estoy haciendo ahora. Si estuviera hablando con un nativo de Puerto Rico, la República Dominicana, no importaría, porque yo soy fluido. Así que nada, yo puedo hablar de un rango de temas, no importa el tema. Si quieren hablar de deporte, negocio, compañía, lo que sea, tecnología, estoy para eso, yo puedo hablar, para que sepan. So there's two key things that you need in your journey to learning Spanish. If you want to get fluent in Spanish, you absolutely have to have dedication and an effective routine. You need to be dedicated. You can't be learning 1 day a week or just 2 days a week and then potentially falling off and forgetting about the routine and quitting learning Spanish. Keeping yourself dedicated is what's gonna help you get fluent a lot faster. If you're studying or doing some type of learning activity and improving your Spanish at least 5 days per week and holding yourself to that quota, you will see results fast. That's what I did. I studied 7 days a week, but even 5 is very effective. You need to keep that dedication because your dedication is your foundation to keep your consistency. Without the consistency and dedication, you won't end up seeing any results and you're going to be stuck on the same level in Spanish. Now, the other thing you need is an effective routine. For a learning routine to be effective, it must touch upon all 4 pillars of language learning. And I'm going to share those 4 pillars. Your routine has to touch upon listening, reading, writing, and speaking. You need to work on all 4 of them on a weekly basis in order to see results and progress a lot faster. The listening and reading components are the input components. So what I mean by that is when you're listening, you're inputting information and trying to understand. When you're reading, you're also taking in information because you're reading the words and now trying to decipher that message and understand what's being said or written down. So those are input types of learning. And with those input learning, that's what's going to help you increase your ability to produce output. To produce output, which is the speaking portion and the writing portion, you have to take in a lot of input. And that's what's going to help your output get better. Just think about it this way. Like for you to understand, for instance, the term ¿cómo estás? You had to have heard that before. You had to have it written down, pronounced to you. So that's the writing and listening part. And then from there, you were able to learn what that meant. And now you can use that phrase, ¿cómo estás? So now you can write ¿cómo estás? Without thinking about what it is that you're saying. And you can also say como estas to a person with confidence. Why? Because you've already input this information in your brain. Reading and listening will help boost your writing and speaking a lot faster. And that's why it's so important with your routine that you're touching upon all of these. And once you get comfortable doing that repeatedly on a weekly basis, you're going to see results a lot faster. Again, not in just a month or two, but as the months go on, you will constantly see progress. And eventually, in about a year, you'll be able to become fluent. So, your routine needs to touch upon all four of these pillars: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And every day during your routine, you should be doing some amount of studying that involves all four of those. And that's what's going to really accelerate and show you that growth over time. So now we're going to finally talk about the routine I use and that you guys can use to learn Spanish and get fluent a lot faster. So first, let's start off with the listening part of the routine. So if you guys want to get a lot better at understanding and being able to understand native speakers faster, work on your listening skills. To work on your listening skills, look for podcasts that are in Spanish and speak about topics that you're interested in. Look for YouTube channels of Spanish speakers that you like that talk about topics that you like. Or listen to music. Music's also a great way to learn Spanish, which I'm sure many of you know. So here's what you got to do whenever you're listening to something in Spanish. Whether you're listening to music, watching a show, or listening into a podcast in Spanish, the key strategy that you need to do is when you're listening to this content in Spanish, actively listen, try to hear as best as you can what's being said. And when you run into parts where you can't understand what's being said or you don't know the word or phrase that's being said, you pause the content, go into it, and then look into the transcript. If it's a YouTube video or maybe a podcast, look into the transcript and look at that part that you're stuck on. Read the phrase, read the words that you're not understanding, and go look them up if the translation isn't available in the transcript. Go look them up. This way you'll be learning new words and new grammar phrases a lot faster, which is going to help you get fluent quicker. You must look up the words and phrases that you don't understand and write them down and then use them later and practice them, practice saying them. Once you feel like you've understood what the phrase means and you looked it up and now you know what it means, go back to that content that you were watching, go in and re-listen to it, replay it. If it's a song, I don't know, a song by Bad Bunny, let's say, and there's a bar, a verse, there's a little line that he says that you're not understanding, and you've looked it up now and you've learned what the word and phrase means. Now replay the song at that part and listen to it all over again. Keep repeating that process until it starts to sink in and becomes easier for you to understand. And as you continue to do this, you'll notice that your listening skills are going to get better and better each time. So I'm going to share with you some of the YouTube channels and podcasts and music that I would listen to when I was working on learning Spanish and trying to get fluent. There's quite a few channels on YouTube. One that I totally recommend, whether you're beginner, intermediate, or advanced, is this guy named Julio Fopoli. He has a channel on YouTube where he does a lot of different skits with puppets. They're really funny. Where it helps you is that through these scenarios, they're different types of scenarios. He has you listen to the dialogue, and then what he'll do is provide multiple choice questions and reading comprehension questions at the end. And he has you actively work on your listening comprehension, because after a certain section, he'll go, now that you've listened to the entire video, tell me what was said in this part. Fill in the blank. And these exercises are really helpful to help you get better at understanding. That's one channel I totally recommend. So there's a dude from Spain named Caesar, and he refers to himself as the Spanish language coach. Look him up on YouTube. Look him up in the Apple Podcast application. There he has 3 different types of podcasts for beginner students, intermediate students, and advanced students. So no matter what level you're on, he can definitely help you improve your listening skills. He has podcasts that he does on a wide range of different topics in Spanish, completely in Spanish. And he even offers the free transcript as well. If you sign up to his newsletter or his page, which is completely free, by the way, he has the transcripts for you there where you can go back and see everything that he said within an episode of a podcast and see exactly what each word or phrase means. He even has some like flashcards, digital flashcards that go with the videos as well to help you learn new vocabulary words and phrases. So totally recommend him. Big shout out to Spanish language coach Caesar. I learned a lot of Spanish with him. When it comes to music, that all depends on your tastes. Whatever genre that you're into is definitely there in Spanish. If you like salsa, rap music, rock music in Spanish, go with whatever you like the most and listen to the music. Look into the lyrics when you don't understand something and just keep listening to those songs day in, day out. Once you master one song and you understand the meaning of the entire song, keep listening to it and go find a new song. If you guys want recommendations for music, I'm a rap guy, so I love rap music. I started out listening to Arcángel, Eladio Carrion, Mike Towers, Mickey Woods, Brian Myers, all these types of artists. Big shout out to them. By the way, a good trick to use when trying to figure out which level of content you should be listening to is basically when you're listening to the content of that level, you should be understanding at least half of what's being said. If you're listening to an advanced level podcast and you're not getting hardly nothing, step down to an intermediate level podcast. Don't try to jump up levels. Just stick to something that you can handle and something that's comprehensible for you. So if you're a beginner, try to listen to a beginner level podcast because you're actually going to be able to hear the words, recognize them at a speed that works for you. And that way you're going to learn. It will take a lot longer if you're a beginner and you try to hear advanced level content. That's what's going to slow you down more. So on top of listening, you guys got to be reading as well every day in Spanish as much as you can. You don't have to read every single day. Just try to incorporate like 10 to 15 minutes of reading every day because reading is what's going to help you advance your Spanish a lot faster. Why? Because when you read, you're now forced to take in the language and see grammar structures that you're not familiar with. And on top of that, vocabulary words that you haven't seen before. What's going to happen is you're going to question yourself and be like, well, what do these words mean? What does this grammar structure mean? What does this phrase mean? And that's where it pushes you. So what you want to do in reading is when you come across phrases or words that you don't know, you want to go look up those phrases or words and then write them down. That's how you're going to improve your vocabulary and your grammar understanding. And those are key to getting fluent faster. Spanish isn't just about just exposing yourself to it and thinking one day it's just going to happen out of nowhere. You have to push yourself and learn grammar and repeat that. Reading is a great way to improve your fluency in Spanish. If you're more of a beginner, I recommend reading more basic articles. What I would do during my Spanish journey is, in a beginner level, I would look on Google for basic articles, A1 level, A2 level articles, and read them and learn. And as I got better and got intermediate and advanced, I increased the complexity of the readings. For reading, I recommend looking for articles on Google in Spanish that interest you. So if you're into sports or you're into business or entertainment, whatever it is, look up that topic in Spanish and look for an article on Google. There's plenty. I highly recommend to switch your phone from English to Spanish once you get more comfortable with reading. Why? Because this is also going to help you to stay immersed in the language. And this is important. The more you are immersed in the Spanish language, the more you're going to learn it and also just acquire the language. More immersion leads to faster progress. So the more you see Spanish and interact with Spanish on the daily basis, the faster you'll learn. So switching your phone once you reach a more intermediate level is definitely a good step. I wouldn't switch the phone to Spanish if you're a beginner because it might be a bit too complex. And as we said before, when the complexity is too high, you're not actually going to learn. Now, while we're on the topic of reading, I also highly recommend grammar books. There are some really good grammar books out there that will help you to learn a lot of the common, most used grammar phrases and structures in Spanish. Get a book that also teaches you grammar structures. Grammar structures are the key to getting fluent faster in Spanish. There's Madrigal's book, that's a popular one. It teaches you a lot of the different patterns and grammar structures within Spanish. There's also other ones as well, but I recommend Madrigal's book. All right, now let's move on to writing strategies. Writing is super powerful. Prior to speaking, it's the beginning of you starting to output Spanish. Now, after you've read and listened and you start to learn some Spanish and internalize it, now you got to start outputting because that's important. That's how we get to being able to speak fluently. And one of the stepping stones to getting to speaking better is writing. As you write, you're going to be able to practice phrases and words that you've learned in Spanish, which is going to help you internalize them more. But then also you're going to get used to outputting and thinking in Spanish, thinking about what it is that you want to output in Spanish. Writing is very important here. As you continue to write, you're going to get more comfortable with Spanish itself. You're going to get more fluent because you're going to constantly be thinking of what you want to put on that paper and thinking of the output that you want to produce in Spanish, which will lead to you becoming more comfortable with output and thus getting you more comfortable with speaking eventually, because you will have had contact with the words and phrases that you're saying because you've written them down before. When I was learning Spanish for the past year and change, one of the things I would do for writing is I would take the phrases and words that I've learned in a day and use them to make sentences. Use them maybe to write like a little diary entry and use those phrases and words that I had learned in the day. That's a really good way to get you to get better at internalizing more and more grammar structures and more vocabulary, which will help accelerate your learning. Try to take on a daily basis, maybe put aside 10 to 15 minutes, write a small diary entry, maybe using the vocabulary that you had learned in the day, or maybe just write a few made up sentences using the vocabulary that you learned in the day. Okay, and finally, now let's talk about speaking strategies, how to get better at speaking, because obviously we all want to reach the goal of being fluent and being able to speak fluently. So now for speaking, what I recommend, just like with anything else in life, you got to be practicing it actively. You want to get better at speaking, start speaking as soon as possible and speak as much as you can. If you can speak every day with somebody, do that. I know for some people, the problem is they don't have speaking partners. That's not an excuse. If you're by yourself, then just speak to yourself. Sometimes practice the grammar, phrases, and vocabulary that you've learned recently and use them out loud. If not, if you're fortunate enough to have friends or family, definitely try to speak with those friends or family like a few times per week, maybe 2 to 3 times per week if you can. If not, definitely something that I recommend that I used while I was in my learning journey and still use to this day is italki. Italki there has a list of tutors that you guys can choose from different countries, and they're all native speakers or at least fluent speakers. These tutors are amazing. Like, they'll teach you anything from vocabulary to grammar and even speak with you and help you practice speaking, improve your pronunciation. So I definitely recommend italki. It's something I use to help me get fluent. Pero realmente, si quieren poder hablar, tienen que hablar. Es simple, es bien sencillo. Así es. Whenever you get the opportunities to talk, even if you run into somebody who maybe needs help and they don't speak any English and speak Spanish, go for it. Try to help that person out completely in Spanish. It will push you. And when you're speaking and you realize, hey, I don't know how to say this, or hey, I don't know how to say that, remember those phrases that you don't know and you go and look them up. And then once you figure them out, start using them in speech. And that's what's going to get you to remember those phrases, help you internalize them, and get you more fluent. So the more that you learn these grammar phrases and use them in speech while speaking, the more fluent you'll become. And as you accumulate more and more vocabulary, the more you're going to be able to talk about in Spanish. If you don't got anyone, go on italki at least. Try to book a class at least 2 times a week. It does cost, the prices vary depending on the tutor. Start talking and get that routine going so you can practice and get better. The more you talk, the more confident you'll become, and you'll start to lose that fear of making mistakes and sounding weird speaking in Spanish. All that goes away the more you talk. Y se lo juro a ustedes, todo se puede lograr siempre y cuando tengan las ganas de hacerlo y siempre y cuando tengas la pasión de hacerlo. Okay, so finally, I'm going to go into some resources that I used when I was trying to get fluent in Spanish. As a beginner, I used Duolingo. I totally recommend it. On there, you get to practice all parts of language learning. Listening, reading, writing, and speaking is all on there. So you'll be able to learn new vocabulary as well, new grammar. Duolingo focuses on the most common grammar phrases and vocabulary that's used in native spoken Spanish. So it's really good for beginners. Totally recommend it if you're a beginner. I believe it even goes up to an intermediate level. I'd recommend doing that if you're first starting out. If you're beyond Duolingo and you're more intermediate or advanced, I totally recommend the Spanish Language Coach course, which I'm going to be dropping in the description. Now, it does cost some money. It costs about maybe 120 to 130 US dollars, but it's one single payment and then you own the course forever. It's an asynchronous course where he speaks completely in Spanish. So it helps you to immerse yourself in the language and learn Spanish in Spanish which is a big secret that helps you to get fluent a lot faster. Learning Spanish in English is going to keep you thinking in English, but if you learn in Spanish, you're going to start thinking in Spanish. And at the same time, you'll start improving your audio comprehension because you'll be listening to the language. He has a lot of activities in there. He forces you in that course to read, write, speak as well. There's so many interactive activities. It really feels like he's there teaching with you, although all the lessons are recorded. But it's a really good course that I recommend. I used it to go from probably, I want to say, a B1 level to nearly a C1 level when I was done in just about 2 to 3 months. It doesn't take too long. If you're a beginner, he has a beginner level course as well, so you might also want to check that out. There's plenty of good YouTubers that teach Spanish as well and teach a lot of the most common phrases that are used and have an aim to help people get fluent faster, such as Demontre Brown. I would watch a lot of his videos while I was learning. Bilingue blogs, also Mike Ben. I'd say those are 3 YouTube channels I totally recommend because they definitely teach some good strategies and tips as well to learn Spanish. I used them during my journey and ahora yo soy fluido, así que escúcheme y confíen en mí porque no les voy a mentir, oíste. So now we're going to answer the question, how long will it take you to get fluent? Well, that all depends on how hard you work on it. You get out what you put into it. If you're just working on your Spanish, maybe just 10 minutes a day, you're not really going to learn much, and therefore your progress is going to be a lot slower. You might end up getting fluent in like 2.5 to 3 years, which is a bit too long if you ask me. But if you just simply put together an effective routine that touches upon reading, writing, listening, and speaking, and you take that routine and practice all 4 of those categories about maybe 10 minutes each per day, so a total of, let's say, 40 minutes per day, you'll get fluent a lot faster. In my case, I took that routine that I mentioned where I would be speaking, reading, writing, and listening about 2 hours per day, and that was just because that was what would work for me. I also had plenty of time to be able to put 2 hours a day into my studying routine. So with that, I ended up getting fluent in just about a year and some change, maybe a year and 3 months, I'm gonna say. I got as fluent as I am now. But for you, it all depends on how often you study and who you are really. So I'd say if I had to take a guess, if you're studying about at least an hour a day, that's a good amount of time per day. And when I say an hour a day, I mean split your hour into those 4 categories of learning: speaking, reading, writing, and listening. Try to do maybe at least 15 minutes for each. That makes up an hour in the day. You do that for 5 days a week to 7 days a week, depending on your availability. You'll definitely learn a lot faster. You'll probably get fluent in just about a year and some change. Hemos llegado al final de este video, desafortunadamente. We have unfortunately arrived at the end of this video, but please, if you found this video helpful, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. Por favor, dale like a mi video y suscríbanse a mi canal, because I'm going to be creating content for you guys to help you get fluent in Spanish faster by sharing great tips and strategies. Drop in the comments below what you guys might want to see next or what you're struggling with, and I'll be making a video on that soon. Que se cuiden y chao.